There's a kind of silence that follows some good morning messages, a silence not of absence, but of something left unsaid. It's when you send a text hoping to be remembered, but deep down, you're afraid of being forgotten. You choose your words carefully, soften your tone, maybe even add a little heart at the end. But somewhere in that tenderness, there's tension, a quiet plea, an invisible thread that says, "Please, think of me." And even if he doesn't read between the lines, he can feel it, because energy speaks louder than words. Louise Hay once said, "The thoughts we choose to think are the tools we use to paint the canvas of our lives." And in those first moments of the day, when the world is still soft and vulnerable, the vibration behind your words begins to shape more than just a conversation. It begins to shape the space between you and him. A woman can send a message with the most beautiful words, but if it's coming from a place of fear, it won't land as love. And no matter how well written it is, the heart behind it will always be louder. Sometimes, what you're really saying isn't written at all. It's in the feeling behind the phrase, in the hope that this time, he'll reply with more than a word, in the ache of waiting, in the way your chest tightens when you see his name and pray he still feels something. That's the invisible weight, the emotional ink that writes between the letters, and he senses that. He may not know why, but he knows when your message is asking to be seen, not just shared. This is the place where many women lose themselves, in the silent spaces between giving and receiving. You wake up thinking of him. You reach out because love lives in your heart. But somewhere in this gesture, a little piece of you is asking for validation, for proof that you matter. And that's not wrong. That's human. Especially for the woman who has spent years taking care of everyone else, often forgetting to care for herself. The woman who gives, hoping to be kept. The woman who offers warmth, even when she feels cold inside. Lise Bourbeau speaks of the wound of rejection, the kind that makes you offer more than you receive. And the truth is, many of us have learned to love from that place, to earn affection through effort, to send kindness in hopes it will be returned. But real connection doesn't grow from need. It grows from wholeness, from a place where your message is not a lifeline, but a reflection of the love you already carry within. There is something deeply magnetic about a woman who is full of herself, not in arrogance, but in peace. When she writes, she doesn't write to chase, to prove, or to fill a gap. She writes from a place of presence, from stillness, from truth, and that truth lingers. It echoes in the heart of the man who receives it, long after the words have faded. This video isn't about clever phrases or psychological tricks. It's not about making him addicted to your texts. It's about remembering who you are when you reach out. It's about the 7 kinds of good morning messages that leave a mark, not because of the way they're written, but because of the energy they carry. Messages that come from a woman rooted in her soul, not reaching from her wounds. Let's begin there, with the woman who writes good morning, just to be seen. There's a quiet longing that often hides behind a simple good morning. You may not say it out loud, but somewhere inside, you're hoping he'll read that message and remember you. Maybe he'll smile. Maybe he'll reply right away. Maybe this time, the conversation will feel different, more present, more affectionate, more like it used to be. But even as you press send, there's a flicker of doubt, a whisper that wonders, will he even care? This moment isn't really about the words. It's about what you need them to bring back. You're not just saying good morning. You're asking in silence to matter again, to be felt, to be wanted. And there's no shame in that. We've all longed for connection. We've all sent messages not just with our fingers, but with our wounds. Because when a woman writes to be seen, it often means she hasn't felt seen in a long time. Not truly, not deeply. She's been strong, accommodating, forgiving. She's adjusted herself 100 times to fit inside someone else's silence. She's smiled through his distance. She's waited through his absences. And somewhere along the way, she stopped asking if she was still visible to herself. That's the deeper ache, isn't it? Not just that he may ignore you, but that you've been ignoring parts of you for years. The part that still believes in tenderness. The part that wants to be chosen without having to try so hard. The part that remembers how it felt to be cherished before you started bargaining for attention. You've been generous with your love. You've extended warmth even when you were freezing inside. But this habit of reaching out first, of holding space for two, of trying to spark something in someone who no longer sees your light, this habit slowly erodes the sense of self, because love given from emptiness always returns as silence. That good morning you send, is it for him? Or is it a plea from the parts of you that feel invisible? When you pause and feel into that moment, really feel. You might notice the ache beneath the habit, the fear beneath the ritual, and that's where the healing begins. Not in changing what you write to him, but in changing what you believe about yourself when you write it. Because if you only feel worthy when he answers, if your mood shifts with every unread message, then the conversation isn't really with him, it's with your own fear of not being enough. And that is a wound that no man can heal. But what happens when you begin to see yourself first? When you become the one who greets your soul each morning before you reach for your phone? What shifts when the first good morning isn't a question to him, but an answer to you? That's when the energy of your message begins to change. That's when your presence starts to shine louder than your words. That's when he feels you. Not because you need to be seen, but because you have remembered your light. And perhaps that's the beginning of a new kind of message. One that doesn't beg to be answered, but simply radiates truth. One that says, without a word, I am here, I see myself, and that is enough. There's something dissonant in the effort to be impressive. It's a vibration that starts subtly, maybe in the way you reread your message before sending, or how you adjust your tone to seem more charming, more effortless, more wanted. And yet, beneath that polished attempt, there's a tremor. A fear that if you don't say it just right, you might disappear again. But what if you didn't try so hard? What if your presence, raw, whole, imperfect, was enough? Louise Hay reminds us, I do not have to earn love. I am lovable because I exist. And there's something breathtakingly powerful in that truth. Because when you stop editing your soul to be chosen, your energy shifts. You move from performing to being, from chasing to allowing. And that shift is felt, even through a screen. You see, trying to impress is often a disguise for longing. You want to be seen, so you shine brighter. You want to be desired, so you become more agreeable. But love, the kind that stays, does not grow in the soil of performance. It grows in presence, in truth, in the courage to show up exactly as you are, without the costume of perfection. Think about the people who have left the deepest marks on your heart. It wasn't their words rehearsed or their timing polished. It was their presence, how they made you feel safe, seen, understood, without needing to impress you. And that's what he remembers too. Not the cleverness of your message, but the feeling of being met by someone grounded, someone whole, someone real. When you write from a place of self-trust, your energy becomes magnetic, not loud, not demanding, just quietly radiant. It's not the words that hold him. It's the peace he feels when reading them. A peace that says, she's not trying to win me. She's not trying to fix me. She's simply here. And that kind of presence is rare. That kind of presence is unforgettable. The paradox is this. The less you try to be impressive, the more unforgettable you become. Because what lingers isn't the decoration. It's the essence. The soul behind the sentence. The stillness behind the morning greeting. The confidence of a woman who doesn't need a reply to feel seen, because she already sees herself. And that's where the magic lives. In the space between expectation and expression, in the freedom to show up without the need to prove your worth. Because when your love is no longer tied to approval, it becomes sacred. And in that sacredness, you are no longer performing love. You are embodying it. There's a frequency inside every word you write. Even when you think you're being neutral, even when your message is brief, there's an emotional echo beneath each syllable. And while the words may say, good morning, what's actually received is the energy behind them. Was it born from peace, or from the ache of needing a response? Need has a certain weight. It presses through the text, clings to the silence that follows, and waits, sometimes breathlessly, for reassurance. It doesn't always sound desperate, but it feels urgent. It feels like a whisper beneath the words that says, please don't disappear. Please still want me. And while that longing is deeply human, it often clouds the connection we seek. Presence, on the other hand, feels different. It doesn't rush. It doesn't beg. It simply arrives. It exists like morning sunlight through the window, soft, steady, and unforced. When a woman writes from presence, her message doesn't ask for validation. It offers peace. It carries the stillness of someone who has made peace with herself first. Men, whether they know it or not, feel this difference. Even those who don't speak the language of emotions fluently still respond to its frequency. He may not be able to name what shifted, but he will feel it. He will feel the difference between a message sent from emptiness and one sent from fullness. And that's where your power lives. Not in how poetic you can be, but in how grounded you are when you speak. When your words come from a place of self-acceptance, they don't just communicate, they connect. They create safety. They create resonance. They say, without needing to explain, I'm here, and I'm whole. But when the message comes wrapped in fear, it becomes more than a greeting. It becomes a test. Will he reply quickly? Will he say something sweet? Will this be the day he sees me again? And when the answer doesn't meet the unspoken hope, the pain deepens. Because it was never just about the message, it was about what you were secretly hoping to fix with it. The healing begins when you pause and listen. Not to him, but to yourself. To the tone beneath your words. To the place inside you that wrote them. Was it calm? Was it afraid? Was it waiting to be chosen? This isn't about silencing your longing. It's about letting your longing be met by you first. Because when you meet your own need for presence, your messages stop searching for it outside. They start offering instead of pleading. They start radiating instead of reaching. And from that place, even silence cannot shake you. Because you are no longer waiting to be seen. You are choosing to be present. And that changes everything. There is a different kind of beauty in the message that isn't sent out of lack, but from overflow. When you are emotionally nourished, spiritually alinhada, when your soul feels like it belongs to you again, your words change. They no longer reach outward, searching for confirmation. They extend gently, like ripples from a still lake, touching without clinging, offering without asking. And that changes everything. A woman who writes from fullness isn't trying to fix a silence. She isn't measuring his response, or using the conversation as a way to feel temporarily seen. She is already rooted in herself. She is already home. And so her good morning doesn't carry the vibration of longing. It carries the vibration of light. When you've spent years giving from depletion, giving from fear, giving from the desperate hope that maybe this time it will be different, it can feel strange to simply give from presence. But that's where your most magnetic energy lives, in the fullness that says, this message is an expression of my joy, my calm, my self-love, not a currency for affection. Think of the mornings when you woke up and didn't feel like shrinking, when your breath moved through you without tightness, when your heart didn't tremble with the memory of absence. On those days, your energy was different, wasn't it? You moved slower, softer. There was no panic, no grasping. And if you reached out, it came from a place of sharing your sunrise, not saving your heart. That's the frequency that stays. That's the energy he remembers. Not because it was louder, but because it was cleaner. It didn't need anything. And that kind of feminine presence is rare. It's what allows a man to relax, to feel safe in your presence, because he isn't being asked to complete a part of you. He's being invited to witness the part of you that's already complete. But this fullness isn't built in a moment. It's cultivated. It's grown from the slow, sacred work of returning to yourself, from saying no when your soul says no, from feeding your mornings with silence, stillness, and the kind of self-honesty that hurts before it heals. When a message comes from a full cup, it carries grace, and grace is what lingers. Grace is what makes a man pause, reread, and feel something deeper, even if he doesn't know what it is. It's the whisper of your wholeness that reaches through the screen, and when he senses that, he doesn't just remember the message. He remembers you, not the version that needed to be saved, but the one who saved herself and chose to speak from there. A message is never just a message when it comes from a woman in presenza. It becomes a vibration, a memory, a moment that echoes beyond the screen. And what you may see as a simple, good morning, when sent from the depth of your essence, becomes something more. It becomes an atmosphere. It wraps around him not with urgency, but with warmth. Not with pressure, but with peace. Because you're not just saying words. You're inviting him into your world. And when that world is calm, grounded, connected, he feels it. Maybe not consciously. Maybe he won't know why your message lingers longer in his mind, why he pauses, why he thinks of you during the day when the noise settles. But somewhere in his being, your presence is felt. Not because of what you said, but because of who you were when you said it. There is an aura around a woman who has made peace with her solitude, who isn't trying to use love to escape herself, but rather shares love from a place of abundance. This is the kind of woman who turns a few words into sanctuary. Her messages don't just speak, they soothe, they ground, they breathe. And this is what makes the experience unforgettable. He's not remembering your good morning because it was clever or poetic. He's remembering how it made him feel. He's remembering the emotional safety it offered, the feminine steadiness, the softness that didn't ask anything of him, but somehow gave everything. We are all drawn to what feels like home, and a woman who is at home within herself becomes that, not by pretending, not by performing, but by returning, again and again, to her own soul, by speaking from a place of wholeness instead of lack, by greeting the morning not with need, but with reverence. So when she reaches out, it doesn't feel like an interruption. It feels like a breath of fresh air. It feels like someone who isn't trying to pull him closer, but is simply sharing her morning sun. And that kind of experience is rare in a world of noise and urgency. You become unforgettable not by trying harder, but by embodying more of who you truly are. The woman who sends messages that awaken peace, that offer silence in the middle of chaos, that carry a fragrance of depth, even in the lightness of a single line. And in the quiet after he reads your message, something inside him settles, something opens, and that feeling of being touched, not chased, is what makes him think of you, long after the words have faded. It's not the heart at the end of your message. It's not the softness of your words, or how carefully you chose them. What lingers isn't the style, it's the sensation. And more often than we realize, what a man carries with him throughout the day isn't the memory of your message, but the emotion your presence awakened in him. Security, that's the secret. Not control, not perfection, but emotional safety, a rare feeling that is so often missing in the fast, reactive world of modern connection. It's the way your energy didn't rush him, the way your message didn't ask for anything more than his presence, the way you seemed grounded in yourself, and because of that, made space for him to be. When a woman sends a message without the sharp edge of expectation, without the fear of not being answered, she gives something priceless. She gives freedom. And in that freedom, a man can breathe. He can lower his guard. He can feel. Not every man knows how to name what he feels in those moments, but they remember. They return in thought to what made them feel safe, seen, and softly invited into intimacy without demand. This isn't about being passive. It's about being present. You're not shrinking yourself to make room for him. You're expanding into your own presence so deeply that it invites his without force. And that, paradoxically, is what makes you unforgettable. You become the pause in his day that soothes instead of stimulates, the space that calms rather than provokes, the echo that says, you are allowed to just be here. And in a world where most interactions ask for performance, this authenticity becomes magnetic. So no, it's not your punctuation that he thinks about. It's not the clever way you said, good morning. It's the way he felt for a moment, that he could rest in your presence, that he didn't have to impress or explain, that he wasn't being measured, he was simply being met. And the woman who offers that kind of space is not easily forgotten. She becomes a memory wrapped in calm, a sensation he may not understand, but quietly longs to return to. That's the real reason he thinks of you. Not because you pushed your way into his mind, but because you gave him a place where his heart didn't have to hide. There's a quiet shift that happens when a message stops being an offering and starts becoming a test. It's not always obvious. On the surface, it still looks like care, like interest, like love. But underneath there's a tremor, a question wrapped in kindness, a hope that says, please prove that I still matter to you. This is when the simple act of saying, good morning, becomes heavy. Not because the words are wrong, but because their intention carries a hidden need. You begin watching for his response like it's a verdict. If he answers quickly and warmly, you breathe easier. If he's distant or silent, the ache grows louder. Suddenly, your sense of worth is hanging on his attention. And that's not love. That's a cycle of self-abandonment. The trap here is subtle, because we've been taught that if we love well enough, give enough, stay soft enough, we'll be chosen. So we try. We reach out. We give again. But when the giving is actually a hidden test, will he see me? Will he still want me? Then every response becomes evidence. Evidence of being loved or being forgotten. This cycle can be exhausting, because no matter how beautiful your message is, if it's being used to soothe a fear, it will never fully land where you hope. You'll keep needing more replies, more reassurance, more proof, and it will never feel like enough. Because the wound it's trying to cover was never about him. It was always about the part of you that didn't feel chosen in the first place. Louise Hay reminds us that every thought we think is shaping our future, and when our thoughts are rooted in lack, in not enoughness, in fear of abandonment, we end up reliving that reality again and again, even in love. But it doesn't have to stay this way. There is power in recognizing when your love begins to bend toward performance. There is wisdom in noticing when your tenderness becomes a request for proof, because in that awareness, you begin to reclaim yourself. You start asking different questions. Not, will he reply? But, why does his silence make me question my value? Not, did I say it right? But, what part of me is still waiting to be seen? And the more you turn inward with compassion, the more you shift the center of gravity in your relationships. You no longer need his attention to feel grounded, because you are learning to anchor in your own presence. So the next time you feel the pull to send a message not from joy, but from fear, pause, feel, ask, is this an expression or a test? Because the woman who no longer needs proof to believe in her own worth becomes a force of quiet, radiant truth, and that truth doesn't beg to be answered. It simply is, and that is unforgettable. There's a moment, just before the world wakes up, when your soul is most honest. It's the breath between sleep and movement, when your heart hasn't yet put on its armor. In that stillness, there's a quiet voice inside you, and most days, you don't hear her, because the first thing you do is reach outward. You check your phone, you scan for connection, you send that message. But what if, instead, you paused long enough to send that message inward? Louise Hay said, begin every day with self-love, not as a mantra to memorize, but as a way of living, because the words you offer to yourself in the morning carry the blueprint for everything you will seek or settle for throughout the day. If you begin with absence, you will crave presence. If you begin with silence, you will chase sound. But if you begin with your own voice, speaking gently to the girl inside, you'll remember that you were never waiting for anyone else to wake you up. What would happen if your first good morning wasn't typed to him, but whispered to you? Not as a routine, but as a ritual, a quiet homecoming. What would shift in your heart if, before wondering how he feels, you asked yourself how you feel? Not in judgment, not in analysis, just in presence, in truth. Most women carry this ache, a need to be loved that was never met in childhood, in past relationships, in the silences that stung deeper than any word. And so we learn to love outward first, to seek affirmation before offering it to ourselves. But that cycle ends where self-listening begins. You don't need to write a poem. You don't need to feel healed. You only need to be willing to speak to your own soul the way you wish he would speak to you. To say, I see you. I'm here. You don't need to earn love today. You already are love. And in that moment, something softens. Something within you exhales. Because when the first message of your day is rooted in self-honor, every word that follows carries that frequency. Whether or not he replies becomes less urgent. Whether or not he remembers you becomes less defining, because you remembered yourself. So tomorrow, or any morning when you feel the ache, try this. Place your hand on your heart. Close your eyes. Breathe. And speak the kind of good morning you've always needed to hear. Say it to the part of you that's tired, to the part that still waits, to the part that feels invisible. Let her know she is seen, because the woman who begins her day by loving herself becomes the kind of woman whose presence lingers, not because she reached out to be remembered, but because she remembered herself so deeply that others couldn't help but feel it too. There comes a point when the messages stop mattering, not because they didn't mean something, but because you've started to mean more to yourself. The truth is, words fade. They disappear into memory, into silence, into that strange space where old conversations once lived. But energy stays. The feeling someone gave you, the feeling you gave yourself, that's what remains. Louise Hay, with her infinite gentleness, said, every thought we think is creating our future. And when your first thought in the morning is rooted in self-worth, not in anxiety, not in scarcity, not in the hunger to be remembered, you begin to shape a different kind of day, a different kind of life, a different kind of love, because the most powerful message you'll ever send is the one you send with your energy. And the woman who is grounded in her own essence doesn't just speak differently, she lives differently. She no longer measures her value by responses, by replies, by being chosen. She is already chosen, by herself. And that vibration is what lingers in a man's memory, not her effort, but her essence. The most unforgettable presence is the one that doesn't try to be unforgettable. It simply is. It lives in alignment. It radiates truth. It communicates without urgency. And when she sends a message, it's not to test, to pull, to prove. It's to share the stillness she has cultivated within. That's what echoes long after the words are gone. Lise Bourbeau speaks of the wound of rejection, how it begins to heal not when someone chooses us, but when we stop offering our hearts as currency for love, when we stop negotiating our presence, when we stop asking, "Am I enough?" and begin declaring, "I am whole." This is not the end of your story. This is the beginning of a new kind of love, a love that starts within, a love that doesn't wait to be mirrored, a love that walks into each morning with her head held high, her voice steady, her spirit intact. So maybe tomorrow, or even tonight, before you reach for your phone, you reach for yourself. You speak to that sacred, often forgotten part of you with reverence. You send the kind of message to your heart that you've longed to receive from someone else. Say it, mean it, feel it, and if you feel called, let this be your ritual. Let this be your way of rewriting the story. You are not broken. You're just remembering who you truly are. And if this video touched a part of you that needed to be seen, I invite you to subscribe to this channel. This space is yours, a space of emotional truth, spiritual remembrance, and feminine power. You are not alone on this path. And if your heart feels ready for the next step in this journey, there's a video waiting for you right here on the screen. Click it. Let it hold you. Let it remind you of your own light, because you deserve to be loved, first by you.